schools where you have 500, 600, 700 kids coming to school every day. They don't have access to clean water.
So where do they typically go for water then if they don't have clean? Or they just do they take their chances?
There's two options. One, you're either walking a long ways, several miles for clean water. And so typically they'll fetch water once in the morning, once in the afternoon, to hopefully have enough water for the day. And then if you're not within range of a well, then you're just using a local stream, stagnant ponds, really whatever you can find, boiling it and hoping for the best.
Ever hear about people working across the globe to help other less fortunate people, most of the time in Africa? Well, today you get to hear directly from Erin Porter, the Executive Director of Global Samaritans, where we chat all things Zambia, the orphanage they operate, and the water wells they build to provide safe, clean drinking water to local villages. So, let's do it.
Too many days in the darkness without a glimpse of the light. Running tired and broken and scared, but I swear I'll never give up the fight. I see you broken and beat, head pulled down over your eyes. Every part of you wants to surrender, but darling, you were meant to survive.
Erin, thanks so much for coming on the podcast today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yes. So to start, I'm so excited to hear all things Zambia. But can you give us an insight into really like what kind of work Global Samaritans specializes in and what your mission kind of looks like over in Africa?
Sure. So we have a 3-part mission. Well, we had a 3-part mission. Now we have a 4-part mission. We were founded by 2 doctors. They actually moved to Zambia pretty much sight unseen to relieve another doctor. While they were there, it was kind of the height of the AIDS epidemic. They decided to start a children's home. So our 3-part mission for a long time was to raise mature, productive children. Our goal has always been for the children to stay in Zambia. What you see a lot of times is what we call brain drain, where the best and the brightest from Zambia leave. But they wanted their children to stay in Zambia and kind of improve the country from within. So we're raised mature children, kind of come along pastors, help with discipleship, evangelism, kind of help facilitate what they're already doing in their communities. And then the 3rd part was to provide an opportunity for people to experience life-changing missions and experiences. And then about 10 years ago, we had the opportunity to add in clean water and well drilling. And so we now have a 4-part mission in which we drill wells in villages in Zambia.
That's interesting to hear, especially the part of, I love that you guys are trying to keep children in Zambia, because people don't realize, I think, in the United States that when we have like a huge influx of immigration into the country, what we're doing is actually picking and taking away pretty much the top tier people from all of these countries around the world, which almost cripples these countries when you're taking like the well-educated, the people who have gotten training and some knowledge, and now they're all set to serve that country, but then they end up going to a more developed country like the United States. And what that really does, because you end up taking away like the George Washingtons and the Abe Lincolns of these countries that are really like they're the true leaders of the countries that can really truly make a difference. So that is amazing to hear that you guys, your goal is to keep people there. My first question too is really how has the communication been for you guys over there, being able to communicate with the locals and people over there? Because I got to think, if somebody like me were to go over there for like a week or so, like how are you guys able to really put all of this together, working with an entirely different culture, different people, and really building what you guys have built so far?
So a couple different things. First of all, communication has drastically improved since I got involved in 2005. It used to be when I would go, and back then I would go for 6 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, stay. And I would talk to my then boyfriend, now husband, and we would talk about once a week for 10 minutes, and it would cost $1 a minute. So it cost me $10 a week to talk to him. Now I talk to my Zambian staff almost every day via WhatsApp or email or phone. So we're kind of in constant communication. Secondly, we actually have a full Zambian staff in Zambia. So we have a orphanage director, we have a children's home director, we have a well drilling crew, we have a full staff at our children's home. And so, and most of them have been with us for a long time. Our orphanage director's been with us almost 20 years. And so we have complete trust in them, and we really are relying upon them to do kind of the groundwork in Zambia. They're the ones finding the children who need a home. They're the ones identifying villages, identifying pastors that we work with. So I am able to talk to them every day if I wanted to. I actually have better cell phone service in Zambia than I do in some parts of my
really?
Yes. But like I said, we are really dependent on our Zambian staff, and they're phenomenal in that regard.
Yeah. What language is it over there? It's not in English, is it?
So they actually speak 72 languages in Zambia. It is a former British colony, so they do speak English. That's the official language of Zambia.
Okay, that helps a little bit then, right?
Yes, definitely. Certainly, all of our children speak English, or most of them do. Some don't when they come. But the closer you are to the main road, the more English you speak. As you get further out into the bush and the villages, they'll speak more tribal languages. But we are able to communicate with everybody we work with.
Okay, good. And for people really hearing Zambia maybe for the very first time as a country, can you kind of paint the picture of really like what that country's like and where it's exactly located and a little bit about it?
Sure. So, funny story, I actually signed up to go to Zambia for the first time, wrote a check for deposit, literally had no idea where it was, had to come home and look it up on the map.
That's commitment right there.
Yes. So our average listener, you are not geographically inept if you don't know where Zambia is. I didn't either. But it's kind of sub-Saharan Africa. South Africa's at the bottom. Then you have like Botswana, Zimbabwe, and Zambia. So Zambia actually touches, I think, 7 other different African countries. It's kidney bean shaped.
It's 8 actually. They have 8,
8
neighbors. Okay. Yeah, I was looking at this huge map that I have behind me, and I was like looking at it, and I was like, wow, outside of like maybe China and Russia, they might have like the most neighbors ever, because I'm thinking they have 8 neighbors, which is Angola, Botswana, the Congo, Malawi, Mozambique, Namibia, Tanzania, and Zimbabwe. And I was thinking, just because of the Canada fire that's infecting like the air in the Northeast with New York City right now, I'm like, we only have 2 neighbors in the United States. And I was like thinking of Zambia, they have 8 neighbors. Imagine the amount of like difference in like, transportation and trading and economy and possible like political conflicts that could be going on. I mean, that is insane. 8 neighbors.
Absolutely. Because you have countries like Botswana and South Africa, which are relatively politically stable, especially now. Then you have like the Democratic Republic of the Congo up north, and Zimbabwe, who have not been politically stable in 20 years. So, you're getting a lot of diverse political problems, immigrants. Just all kinds of things.
Well, if you just look at the United States too, we have 2 neighbors, and we always have like how many problems going on. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So it's crazy.
But so the best way I can think of to describe Zambia is National Geographic Africa. If you were to picture like a front of a National Geographic magazine
with the lions and
just kind of like the grasslands and the mud huts, and that is Zambia. For the most part, especially in the area where we're in, which is Livingston. It's in the southern part of Zambia. Lusaka, the capital city, is going to be different. The Copper Belt's going to be different. But in Livingston, in our part of Zambia, it's National Geographic Africa.
So is tourism a heavily driven field?
It is now. So probably within the past 20 years, it has become a big thing. We're right there on the border with Zimbabwe, where Victoria Falls is. Prior to 20 years ago, Zimbabwe would have been the tourist hub. If you were going to see Victoria Falls, if you were going to go to Africa and do a couple different country tours, you would fly in and out of Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe kind of collapsed with land reappropriation. Their economy spun out of control. And so Zambia really took advantage of that, and they built up the tourist industry. They put in some nice hotels. They put in some flights to and from Livingston, tourist activities. And so in the past 20 years, we've really seen an increase of tourism in the Livingston area.
Well, and I like that you brought up the Victoria Falls, because when you think of the United States, like the very first things you might think of is like New York City, Mount Rushmore, Los Angeles, like these big, huge cities. But when you think of Africa, really what should be on the very front page of the brochure is Victoria Falls, because it is beautiful. And for people hearing that for the first time, Victoria Falls is one of the largest waterfalls in the world. It is twice the size of Niagara Falls, which is like probably the only falls that people on the Western hemisphere of the world think of when they think of falls, Niagara Falls. It is twice the size of it. It is a monster. And that is a site that I think everybody should see, because it is also I think it's like a kilometer wide or something like that too.
It's over a mile long, and it has the most volume of water of any waterfall in the world. So It is definitely a big tourist attraction.
And that obviously brings how much wildlife along with it too, which.
Absolutely. So.
Yeah. And I saw a very interesting piece on your website that definitely rang some bells in my ears. Like, oh, well, that's kind of funny, but it makes sense now that why you guys are over there, that Zambia has one of the largest waterfalls in the entire world, but yet it is also a country that has 4.8 million Zambians without access to clean water. And that's just, when you read something like that, you're like, wait a second, that doesn't really, I mean, wow, the proportion is crazy when you think about that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's nearly a third of their population does not have access to clean water.
Wow. With that much water too.
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of it is a lack of infrastructure. Zambia is very sparsely populated. Okay. And so, having the infrastructure, being far away from cities, being far away from your neighbors, it makes access to water very difficult.
And that's where you guys came in with your water drilling project, right?
That's correct. Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So we have always been interested in clean water, especially our Zambian director. His name is Dave. He was born and raised in Zambia. And he was sitting with a mission team one summer, and they were talking about, clean water and well drilling. And this individual whose father-in-law had been involved for 20 plus years, he was making his first trip. He said, well, that's what my dad does as a hobby. He buys old well drilling rigs, fixes them up, and sends them to third world countries.
No.
Completely donates them.
Oh my gosh.
And he said, I don't want to commit him to this, but I think this is something he would be interested in doing with Global Samaritans. And fast forward just a couple months later, he flew our Zambian director, Dave, over to learn how to run a well drilling rig. A well drilling rig. And he's now donated. He's about to send his fourth well drilling rig to us, along with all the support vehicles. And so he really launched us into clean water projects. And so we've had the opportunity to drill clean water all over Zambia, schools, villages. We've drilled in clinics. So you're running a clinic, basically a mini hospital without access to clean water, which is unfathomable. Schools where you have 500, 600, 700 kids coming to school every day. They don't have access to clean water.
So where do they typically go for water then, if they don't have clean, or do they take their chances?
There's two options. One, you're either walking a long ways, several miles for clean water. And so typically They'll fetch water once in the morning, once in the afternoon, to hopefully have enough water for the day. And then if you're not within range of a well, then you're just using a local stream, stagnant ponds, really whatever you can find, boiling it and hoping for the best.
Yeah, geez, that's you're just rolling the dice at that point.
Yes, very much so. And really, and we may get into this a little bit later, but really the lack of access to clean water disproportionately affects females, because oftentimes that's seen as a female's job. And so if you're a girl in a family, you're going to spend half of your day going back and forth collecting clean water, which means you don't have the opportunity to go to school a lot of times.
Yeah, and that's the real chain reaction is where it comes from, is that like you said, you're either walking a long ways to get clean water, when if you do have clean water, that opens up probably 3 hours of your day that now you can spend either like preparing meals or maybe learning and being in school. That now when you compound that over the course of maybe a decade, 15, 20 years, now all of a sudden an entire group of people who haven't had to trek to get water every day have spent time learning new trades, and then they start applying those new trades, and then it's like off to the economic races right there, and then you're good. You're step by step, obviously.
Absolutely.
And that actually reminded me of like when I think it was in Scotland, where whiskey was first created, was because people were drinking out of streams and rivers, and obviously where the river travels downwards, it actually gets a little bit more contaminated because people from upstream are obviously dumping things into the river and contaminants and waste. And they tried to create like a filter for cleaner water, and they ended up accidentally kind of inventing whiskey based off of trying to clean the water that was filtering down from upstream. So it's very ironic how when we do try to fix these things, sometimes even better things come out,
Yes. Well, and not only are they having to walk for water or having to share water with other villages, they're also sharing it with livestock and animals. And, it's not a great option. Even if you're able to boil it, it's still a risky situation.
Yeah, because you're just, you're becoming contaminated, and then that's putting more of a weight on the local doctors and hospitals that I can only imagine, if they are using not as clean water, they're already hurting to begin with.
And historically, Zambia has only had approximately one doctor per every 8,000 to 10,000 Zambians.
Wow.
That's not specialty doctors. That's not, anything. That's just a doctor at all. And so when you're drinking contaminated water and you're coming down with diseases and all this stuff, you're taxing an already stressed healthcare system. So.
Yeah, and that's almost at that point, you're like teetering more so on like the potential of collapse and stuff at that degree.
Absolutely.
And could you tell us a little bit about your orphanage too? Because I think that's amazing. And also too, where is that? You answer that first, then I'll follow up with a question.
Okay. So we have a children's home. And we do it a little bit differently. A lot of children's homes around the world are run kind of like an institution. They'll have somebody that comes and works 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day, and then they go home and somebody else works a shift.
Okay.
Our children's home, they set it up differently from the beginning. And we actually have house moms and house dads. And so they live there full time. These are not their children, and they raise anywhere between 8 to 10 children, kind of same sex, roughly same age as their own. The kids call them mom, dad. Okay. And so, they have signed on to be committed to these children 24 hours a day. And so we have anywhere between 40 and 60 children at a given time. Per government, the Zambian government, we're only required to keep them till they're 14. But education is something that we're really invested in. And so we are committed to keeping them through the end of high school, and then on to either like a trade program or college if they want to. And so our youngest are about 5, and we go anywhere up to in the 20s, because a lot of times you'll get maybe a 13-year-old who's never really been in school. And so they come to us at 13, but they're in grade 2. They don't know how to read. They don't know how to write. And so we're committed to seeing them through as far as they want to go school-wise.
Well, it's awesome because you're also taking them too. A lot of times people think, oh, they're 18, they're good to go. When it's like at 18, the later teens, and even in the 20s, people are facing some of the biggest decisions that they're ever going to face in their life. And those decisions that they make at that time are going to project them exactly where they end up at 30, 40, 50 years old. And it's great to know you guys are there as long as they want to be there.
Absolutely.
To guide them through that, because decision making is everything.
Absolutely. I mean, you're really kind of choosing the trajectory of your life at that point.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And you don't want to be doing that by yourself for the first time. You're now finally by yourself making all these decisions. It's not, I mean, it's always better with some coaches or somebody obviously they've kind of watched you grow up. What really is the cause, you would say, of historical cause of driving people into becoming orphans? Is there one cause you would say pretty much would be the defining factor?
In kind of the early 2000s, mid 2000s, a lot of it was AIDS, the AIDS epidemic in Zambia. Zambia had one of the highest AIDS epidemics in the world. Non-governmental estimates put the AIDS epidemic at almost 50% of the adult population. Wow, and then you would 50%. Have over 50% of the population that was under the age of 14. And so you really had children raising children, a nation run by children. Certainly that's gotten better with the introduction of antiretrovirals, condoms, other, contraceptives are more widely available and used. So that certainly helped. But still, we see a lot of children still from AIDS, diseases. And most of our children are either double orphans, which both of their parents died of AIDS. And what we were seeing were a lot of grandparents were raising all of their grandchildren. Essentially, their children had all died of AIDS, and you would then find a grandparent who is now raising 10, 12, 15 grandchildren.
Wow.
And then what we're seeing more now is single orphans. Typically, one parent is deceased, a lot of times the mom, and then either the dad is not in the picture or is unable or unwilling to care for the child. And so then we have two main ways that we acquire children. The first is through social welfare, similar to Child Protective Services here in the U.S. And they work to identify cases, situations in which a child needs to be removed from that home and placed with another provider. But we also still work with chiefs. Zambia is still run by, or they're divided into chiefdoms, and you would have a village chief kind of over their chiefdom, and they're aware of different situations in their community, and they'll contact us and let us know about a situation in which a child needs to be placed.
Yeah, if something comes up. I'm very excited to see what the antiretroviral therapy really does in the coming decade or two, because Botswana back in 1999, their government put into place a mission to start targeting pregnant mothers with HIV who are HIV positive, and tried to stop them from obviously transferring down HIV to their children. And since 2010, there are about 2 million children born in Botswana from an HIV infected mother, but not themselves carrying HIV.
Yes.
Which is truly amazing.
We're seeing some of that in Zambia, but then also we're just seeing major difference in life expectancy. Zambia's life expectancy had gotten as low as 38, and now it's in the high 50s, low 60s. So it's just improving quality of life, and it's extending life. It's really making a difference.
Well, even AIDS and HIV too, it's something that is just so hard to stomp out, because you would think, somebody looks at the United States and goes, well, they would just expect maybe it's a top tier country in the world, they wouldn't have these, but we still do, and we still carry it in certain parts as a high area. Me myself being down in Florida, I know it's a huge issue, because in Florida we lead the country by far in cases of HIV and AIDS, to a point where we're about 39 to 40 people per every 100,000 people have HIV and AIDS. And people think that is actually probably going to climb to about 50 in the next 10 years or so,
wow,
which is insane. And really, that's not all of Florida. I would say that really is just where I am in Miami, because if you remove Miami from Florida,
sure,
those numbers would completely collapse, believe me, because it's insane to see, because the second place on that list per worldpopulationreview.com is Hawaii. And Hawaii has about 23 people per every 100,000 people. So Florida actually doubles any country in terms of HIV and AIDS. And you think of the knowledge and the tools that we have here about protection and being aware and careful, but yet we're still not only carrying a high rate, but we're actually projected to increase quite significantly in the future, which is, I mean, it's scary, because HIV and AIDS, I mean, that's an issue that's really, really difficult to stomp out. So then you think of countries that are climbing that economic ladder and on their way up. And, you know, it's thinking of the United States, it's not surprising that you do see this still hindering countries all across the world.
You know, and Zambia is hard too, because, you know, not only there's stigma attached, there's lack of access, there's lack of information, but Zambia is also still a very patriarchal country in which women are a commodity. You know, if my husband owed another man a debt, he can sell me or trade me to settle that debt. And I really have no say so. One, if I have to sleep with another man, but also what kind of protection or contraceptions are used. And so, you know, you're fighting that as well. And Zambia also still, certainly more in the rural areas, but they, you certainly still find cultures and groups who take multiple wives. And so, you know, you have one man sleeping with multiple women back and forth. And, you know, if you're unfaithful, then you're introducing AIDS and HIV into a whole group in which women really have no say so in what's happening.
Yeah, and that spreads like a wildfire, you know, when you just have people going from group to group to group, and especially if they're not being tested, you know.
Oh, yes.
How is testing over there? Because in Botswana, I know they had a heavy transmission rates and very high in all of Africa. But at the same time, you think they were a country that is that tests a lot. So obviously, if you test a lot, you're going to have a lot more positive results. How is it over in Zambia?
It's come a long way, but it's still not great. The stigma attached to even being tested is still just a constant uphill battle. I know when our founders for Global Samaritans were living in Zambia, they would call it a room 7 test. They wouldn't even call it, you know, an HIV or AIDS test. They would call it a room 7 test, and they would actually take the patients into the designated room at the clinic, room number 7, and that's where they would administer it. Because if they had called it what it really was, it would have been refused, and the stigma attached to it was so high that they just refused to even call it by what it was. So it's certainly come a long way, but we're still fighting a lot of that.
Yeah, and actually, I was surprised at this too, that how you know, I mean, it's good that it's the opposite, where it's like lack of stigma and it's been accepted as a disease that exists and needs to be tested. Because down here at major festivals, especially a lot of like gay pride festivals, these trucks come in and it says HIV and AIDS tests on the. It's like it looks like a food truck, and it says it right on it. Like you would look at like Ben and Jerry's ice cream. It says HIV testing, and there is a line of people actually waiting there. And that I thought was crazy, because I had never seen that before, of how accepted it truly is, of like, you know, this is a problem. People are actively trying to seek out to avoid it, to know as soon as possible if they do have it. So, I mean, it really was like an open clinic where I thought it was very interesting, and how a lot of times we should kind of take note of that to end some of these stigmas, because the stigmas really just drive up rates because people don't want to report it, medical avoidance, because people don't want to test positive, even if they are feeling something, something's off within their body, they probably don't want to go, because as soon as they go and it's positive, scarlet letter the rest of your life.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's something that we still face. And in that regard, Zambia is in a lot of ways probably 20 years behind the US. I hope in 20 years we'll see, HIV/AIDS trucks in which you're tested, you're comfortable, you accept it. But they're not there yet. They're 20 years behind in music and clothing and trends. Yeah. And so I'm hopeful that, in 20 years, we'll see trucks that come to, different festivals and things and people are willing to be tested and know their status.
Well, with people like you guys over there, it'll happen because you guys are helping them get out of survival mode. And really, as soon as a group of people is out of survival mode, which is just getting out of, finding water and food and basic health and healthcare and stuff, I mean, then it's off to the races of just learning and applying knowledge and compounding that over and over the course. And then, things really, really do open up rightly. And I'd love to kind of ask you, really, what is the next steps for you guys over there? Do you guys have any projects coming up that you guys would like to kind of share?
Really just more of the same. We're drilling wells. We actually drilled a well yesterday. I got pictures from my Zambian director.
Oh, it's awesome.
We got water. So we really have kind of a small window in which to drill because Zambia has very distinct dry seasons and rainy seasons. So we can only drill in the dry season. So, our hope is that we'll drill.
Was it like June through October-ish?
Typically like May through October, and then kind of from October through April or so is the rainy season. Okay. So we'll drill as many wells as we get funding for between now and when the rains start. We still with our children's home, it's been a great week actually to do this interview or this podcast, because we drilled a well yesterday, and then we actually got a new child yesterday for our children's home.
Awesome.
So, we're really just working more of the same, just trying to impact Zambia, one child at a time and make a difference in that community.
And I got to give you credit for a second, because you're like, yeah, we're doing more of the same. You are bringing clean water to human beings who need clean water. That needs to be said with such excitement for you guys, because that is amazing work, and it's purposeful work. You're helping other human beings, and you're helping human beings that a lot of the United States doesn't even know even exist halfway across the world. So that really, I just want to scream that, because it is awesome work and really, really well deserved, with all the praise ever, because what you guys are doing, I mean, you're slowly but surely building up people that really can never repay you back, and so it's completely so well intended, and it really is awesome and amazing work. And I'd love to see some photos of the wells you guys got going, because I saw one video of the amount of work that goes into that, and when it's finally done and you see like that well pump, pumping water, that is the coolest thing ever. And you have just re-energized an entire community of locals too. So I mean, really, kudos to you guys in the Global Samaritans team, because it is awesome.
Thank you. It's exciting. It never gets old. Clean water never gets old. It doesn't matter how many we drill. It is exciting each and every time. And we have a whole well drilling crew that goes out, that identifies the area, that works with the pastor or works with the chief to find the best location to put the well in. And, it's a multiple day process. Sometimes you hit water, sometimes you don't, sometimes you drill 2-3 more holes hoping to hit water. But like I said, it never gets old. It's always exciting. And, they can't repay us, but we don't expect that either. Our wells are 100% donor funded, from typically groups, individuals, from the US. And so we have no expectation of anything in Zambia. We got a request just this past week for a group, a community that serves marginalized people, mostly handicapped, mentally and physically. And they put in a request for a well, and my Zambian director sent it to me and said, "Can I assume that this is one you want to do?" And I was like, "Absolutely." Because if we don't do it, who will?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, who's gonna come in and do this for them? And so we say yes as often as we can, as often as we have funding for. We'll go in and we'll put in the well and put in the clean water.
Yeah, and the thing is too, when people view nonprofits and look at what people are doing overseas, and so like, it's so easy to not notice how many challenges go into all of this with working with different communities and establishing those relationships and maintaining those relationships and ensuring like everyone's on the same page. I mean, those cultural logistic hurdles are have to be so challenging too. So I mean, what you guys do overall is amazing, and I'd love to help possibly with any funding people who are listening can give you guys. So where can people really find you guys over there? Is it like your just website, Instagram?
We have both an Instagram, Facebook page, and website, globalsamaritans.org. And if I can brag on us for just a second, really the best thing about our organization is that, so I've been the I've been the American director for almost 15 years. I stopped taking a salary 12 years ago, and I do this as volunteer. Everyone in the US that works with Global Samaritans does it because they love Global Samaritans. They love what we do. No one takes a salary. So if you donate to a well or a child or just Global Samaritans in general, 100% of your donation goes directly to Zambia. There's no administrative costs. There's no office space. There's none of that eats up into a donation that's given. So typically a well costs about $7,500. It also helps in that community. It employs our crew. And we're able to go in, and then we use that money just for the benefit of the children and the people of Zambia. And if you give $7,500, all $7,500 goes directly to Zambia.
How many people does one well help with water?
It varies. It depends just kind of on the village size, the community size. But we see anywhere from 150 to 500, 600 people impacted. And if we have time for a brief story, I'll share about one. There was a preschool that needed a well put in. And preschools are very uncommon in Zambia. Typically, you start school grade 1 and go through grade 7. It's subsidized. And then after that, your family has to pay for it. So the whole concept of early education is just non-existent. But there was a preschool about 30 minutes from our organization that wanted a well. We came in, put in a well for the preschool. They were able to use it for the preschool and the school. The community then took that upon themselves. They built a whole garden, irrigation system for the school so that they can provide the children at the preschool and at the school with fresh fruits and vegetables. They teach the children how to farm it, how to cultivate it. The children are then able to take fresh fruits and vegetables home to their own families. And then the community took it a step further, and they created basically a food program for the elderly people in their community, in which they receive fresh fruits and vegetables once every couple of weeks on a regular delivery. And so this one well had the trickle down effect to improve like the nutritional value and just sustenance for not only the preschool, but the school, their families, and then the elderly people within their own community.
Yeah, and those people and the kids go, now I feel I'm contributing. And
Absolutely.
when people feel like they're contributing, they care. All of a sudden, they see a piece of trash on the ground, they want to pick it up because now there's a sense of ownership with it. And
Absolutely.
that really is so important for kids to have early on too, which is really incredible. I mean, I really wish we were doing that in the United States, like teaching kids how to just these basic concepts of growing fruits and vegetables and feeding and how this works. That's really amazing stuff.
Yeah.
I appreciate you guys so much, Erin, for coming on. And I look forward to maybe catching up with you guys down the road on on some updates and see how many wells you guys have installed.
Absolutely. So yeah, we've started drilling for this season, and yesterday was our fourth. So we're rocking and rolling. We have a great crew, and we've gotten a couple donations. We've gotten a grant, and so we hope to drill from now until October.
That's awesome, and this is your busy season.
This is our busy season. Not only with well drilling, but also this is when most teams go to Zambia because you have summer holidays and kind of time off from work. And so we actually have 9 teams that will go to Zambia between March and August.
Okay.
So. All
right. Well, that's awesome stuff. Fun fact before we wrap up about Zambia too. I learned this in through looking at some research. In 1964, some history buffs will get a kick out of this. 1964, the Summer Olympics happened, and Zambia was the first country ever, because that was the same year that they entered the Olympics as the country of Northern Rhodesia. And the last day of the Olympics, they declared their independence from Great Britain. So they're the only country in the world to enter an Olympics as one country and leave as a different country.
That is a fun fact.
Yeah. So if you remember anything about it, Zambia, it's Global Samaritans and also that fact.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Erin. We will link up down the road then.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Yes.
Open your heart and